Van der Wal's message really confirms some basic ideas. And the primary one is that the forces that are present at the beginning are also present throughout life. An intelligence deep within the system that's managing all that and has from the very start. So Van der Wal's material just fills in the details. And the idea is a practitioner could, with that information, the practitioner could recognize those forces in the client. And that when those forces are recognized, then they become more accessible. It's kind of an interface between the scientific world and the mystical world.
Yeah.
Even on the very first day we met, and the first half hour of his very first lecture, he's been here 6 times, I think 6, 14 years ago, I just went, oh, eureka, here's someone who, speaks the language that speaks to me. Van der Wal represents the voice for the soft therapies. It's.
So my name's Robert Castellino. I'm here with Jaap Van Der Wal from the Netherlands.
That's right.
And you're here in Boulder, Colorado at the Energy School with John Chitty teaching embryology. Can you tell me a little bit about how you found John Chitty back in 2003 and what motivated you to come to America?
I didn't found John, John found me. And it was John who brought me to here, but in fact it was Michael Shea. Michael Shea heard me talk in somewhere Switzerland, Kienthaler where he used to come every 2 years with his biodynamic craniosacral. And I had never heard of craniosacral or biodynamic or whatever. But he said, well, you have to come to America. You have to come to a school of my friend, John Chitty. And I was already involved in an own program of going all over the world with courses, well, not in embryology, but embryosophy, a more philosophical approach of the embryo, with the questions, what are we and where do we come from, and what are we doing as an embryo? And I was giving courses about that theme, in the first instance, mainly to anthroposophists, because anthroposophy is, let's say, the domain where I started from. But then I met people like Michael and John, and I heard about polarity medicine, I heard about craniosacral therapy, I even heard about osteopathy. And so gradually I became more involved in circles of osteopaths, polarity, trauma therapy, perinatal psychology. And nowadays the anthroposophical public is my minimum, the others are more represented. So that's why I came here.
So you're a formally trained doctor in medicine in the Netherlands. How does that influence and how has your transformation developed from what you were trained with as a scientific doctor versus what you're teaching today?
Yeah, I must admit, I've never healed or saved any person. I was never a practical medical doctor. I've never practiced. Of course, I did my education. But already very soon in my student career, I was invited by a professor on the Department of Anatomy and Embryology to become, to help him with the anatomy teaching for the students. And very young already, I was 23 years old, when I gave my first lectures on embryology, anatomy, and I loved it, teaching, and apparently I was a good, talented teacher. But then I met a friend, a colleague of mine, Mr. Guus Venderby, and he also was a medical doctor. He also worked in anatomy as an anatomist and a teacher, but also as an embryologist. And I realized that on the institute also was embryology. So I became more and more interested in embryology. And via him, I met anthroposophy. And then, so to say, my scope, my interest changed a little bit. because I became interested indeed in questions like what are we and where do we come from and what has anatomy to tell about it, what is the embryo to tell about it. And then I uh, changed position. Went to Maastricht in the Netherlands. A new university was started there with a new teaching program. And there I started to do research on connective tissue. And that is the beginning of a new attitude towards anatomy. It was there that I found the fundamentals of my modern, let's say, item or gospel, if you want to, that we are not anatomy, that we are not only spatial beings with like a machine built up from elements, but that we are processes, that we are living beings, and like every being, we are appearances in time. And that I could connect with my already embryological interest. And then I started in that age, I think, to give courses for anthroposophical people later, and about a phenomenological approach of embryology, which enables me. I learned it from Goethe, I learned it from my friend, I heard it from Rudolf Steiner. That's an approach in science where you, so to say, do not only think or observe the phenomena, but also try to feel them, to participate in them. That was the essential of Goethean phenomenology, and that's how it worked.
There's an influence you reference quite often in your uh, presentation about embryology, and it's your family of origin and its influence. Can you tell me how that has affected your worldview and its relationship to science and embryology in your presentation?
What my biographical
Your family
involvement
of
was,
origin.
yeah. Looking back, it might have started when I was a very young medical student. I was 2 years old, a medical student in the second year. I was 21 years old and I became pregnant. And that was a story. It just happened. It was not well planned. And at that time, I was very interested in embryo because it was at that moment that I had my first embryo practical. And then I realized myself, what has all this embryology that I see under the microscope and that I could see in a living chicken egg, what does it have to do with the embryo in that days it was my girlfriend. So I experienced a kind of split between the reality, the daily reality that I live, the body that I live in daily life, and the body that I saw under the dissection room and the body that I saw under the microscope. And it was so intriguing, so fascinating that I had to find a bridge between these two realities because I started to feel a kind of split or distance between what I learned about the embryo and the human body in the dissection room and under the microscope. What does it have to do with the world that I live and experience and the body that I feel? So, and then I met Goethe, and Goethe said, well, that has to do with how you look at things. You should not only think about the things that you find, but you have to experience them. Take for true what your senses are telling. So the two bodies might be related with each other, the body of the anatomist in you and the body of Jaap Van Der Wal in you that lives his body. These two realities can be connected. It is not that they are separate worlds, they have to do with each other. And that's where it started, so to say. It has to do with my own question of where do we come from? What do we mean? Because as a boy, I was raised as a Christian boy, and of course, I was used to the questions as well, we have a meaning, there's an aim, we are meant to be here, God is there, and we might be on a route to realize something, maybe heavens and earth or whatever. So I was used to the questions, where are we heading for? What do we do here? What do we mean here? And I started to find answers for that in anthroposophy, in Goethean phenomenology. So that helped me too. There have been moments that I thought to myself, well, maybe I will quit with science and become a medical practical doctor. That has happened 2 times. And most times I decided at the end not to do it because I realized that when I have become a person that is searching for spirit, and that apparently is a paradox with being a scientist. How can you be a scientist and still on the search for something like meaning, finality, spirit? And then I realized that I have to be very well trained in science so that then I would have the authority to talk and to work with the other dimension. And that's why I went on with science. I became a medical doctor, philosophical doctor, habilitated as assistant professor in anatomy. And there I learned that it is possible, to see and to find spirit and meaning and finality in the human body, also as a reality, and not only live the causal principle of science that has always come with explanations and cells and brains and genes. I was looking for meaning, understanding, finality, and okay, to be a good scientist helped me to be a good anthroposophist, phenomenologist, or spiritualist, whatever you call me.
Sure. In your presentations, you orient to a significant amount of detail in how we are conceived, all the way through the moments and the development of the human being in the womb. And what is it in the teachings that you have to offer that differs from the medical model and the scientific model that's being exposed today?
The scientific model is always about cause, is always about looking for conditions that you can manipulate. That's why science is so popular. That is why science is so dominant in our society. It always hands out to us, techniques, ways to manipulate. We can manipulate our health. We can manipulate our diseases. We have drugs for that. We have procedures for that. And that is what science, that's the seductive side of science, that science is helping us with so successful methods to treat our diseases, to change our world, that you nearly start to believe that what they think is also true. Because, that's what I learned from science. You have an idea, and then you try to prove that idea by means of an experiment, of a technique. And when the technique of the experiment is successful, you are seduced, so to say, to think that therefore your idea is true or real. And I found out that that is not the same thing. So, science is good, but it's the risk of science is that it becomes one-sided or monism, only one view on the reality. And I try to be I try to bring a holistic view wherein spirit and matter, soul and body, meaning and cause, finality and causality, both are present. And I do that in a scientific way because I do not want to believe in things like spirit or holism. I want to see it, I want to work with, I want to show it in a scientific way that it is a reality, holism, whole and spirit.
In the significant change in the study itself, away from the human development to study more animals and insects and other creatures. Can you address how that association or disassociation is affecting the development of humanity and bearing children?
My effort also with these courses is to show the people that there are good arguments to consider us as a kind of animal or a well-developed primate. But again, if you study where we come from or how we have developed, you do that with a certain intention. You want to know, why are we here? How did we come here? How has evolution been perceived? How was the procedure of evolution? And why did we come out of it? And that in the embryo, I learned that, of course, you meet there the animality and the animal principles and the vegetative principles. You even meet there the principles of matter and mineral. But I had the question, what are we doing as an embryo? Is there existence? And is there consciousness? How can you live as a being when you don't have a brain? So the questions for me became, what is a body actually? Because an embryo is supposed not to have psyche yet or soul because there's no brain yet. And I saw and I learned from guys like Mr. Blechschmidt and from Goethe that you have to consider the body, the forms, the shape also as behavior. So we could read from evolution, from embryonic developments, from biology, what the bodies of animals and beings and human beings and plants actually are performances. It are performances, it are behavior, and it tells us something about what they are. And we apparently are something else than the animal. That is my view. That's what I saw. And then I realized, yeah, but the story that constantly comes from the science is that we are an animal, that we come out of the animal and we're a highly developed animal. So that I was searching for, is there maybe something else that makes us so special human? And yeah, so for me, I became morphologist. That is maybe better to say that morphologist is the science that is interested in the why, not the know how, but the know why. What does a form mean? What is expressed in the forms and shapes of a living creature? And then as a morphologist, you're interested in the why of a form. What does it mean? And phenomenology was the most successful method for me to find answers to that. That forms have a function, forms have a meaning, forms are behavior. And our body is a very special behavior. No animal performs its body as we are doing it. We are something else. I do not say better, higher, more perfect, or whatever, but something else. And it has to do with our mind, with our spirit. In us, there is working something that keeps the whole in us together. And sometimes you call that your I am, or your spirit, and it has to do with our going upright, with our enormous brain, with our capacity to come in balance. And that is what I gradually discovered. Apparently, it is not that we are a well-developed animal, but it apparently is so that we developed ourselves to the human forms by means of and via the animal forms. So we are not produced by our embryonic development. We are not produced by evolution, but the embryonic development that we perform, the evolution that we apparently performed, is our biography. And if you read it in the right way, you might understand why we are here, where do we come from, will tell us about what do we have to do, where are we going to.
Children to bear on the planet, and what is it that we can do to change to make our species a greater part of the whole on the planet so we're successful along with all those others that inhabit it?
We are successful, they say. But what is the measure of success? That we are with so many? That we ruin this planet because there are so many of us and we can change the planet by our techniques and our industry? What is the success of us? And Darwin says that one of the successes of evolution is, or for the major drive behind evolution is the reproductive force, sexual reproduction. And the funny thing is that when you look in the higher animals, when they start to live in groups, and there you see that the quantitative success of reproduction becomes less and less and less, because it's very seldom that you have a lion bring for 20 small lions. I mean, the real reproduction is that you can copy yourself, and the animal that is the most successful in copying, making more copies of himself, is, so to say, in the mechanisms of Darwin, successful. And it seems that we in this way are very successful, but if you look for the cause of our success, you will see it has nothing to do with our reproduction power. We are very poor in reproduction. It takes a lot of time, to get a reproduction of me. How would I ever create a reproduction of myself? For a sea urchin, it's far more easy. They produce thousands of copies of themselves. So maybe something else is coming in evolution, and that it doesn't have to do with reproduction, but with future, because reproduction is the past. If you can reproduce yourself as an animal, you do not bring something new in the world, you bring more of the same. And maybe that our capacity is not to bring more of the same, but to bring apparently something new in the world. So I no longer consider our children as copies, reproductions of the former generation. No, in the child, the possibility for a new development, for a new future, is every time realized. The child is not made by us. We do not reproduce ourselves in the child, but we create possibilities where mankind can try, make another move, or can try another future out. That is why in the human reproduction, it's not about making, it's about making possible. Our children are not our Nachwuchs, are not our, that's German, it's not our progeny. No, they are possibilities that we offer, can offer, may offer, but it are they who have to decide, what they will do with that future that they get. So you don't make them, you don't possess them, your children come through you, not from you. And that is my dogma, and that is what I show them. Also, biologically spoken, you can maintain simple postulation, and that is, children are not made by a human conception. They appear, they emerge by means of the conditions that are offered by two other human beings, a man, a woman, or whatever. And they are not our possessions. They come through us, but not from us.
What is the disconnect between the world of artificial conception as it's developed today versus the natural processes of conception? And what do you see as the challenges of bringing artificial conception closer to natural conception?
The risk of manipulative or artificial conceptions is not the technique itself. Again, it's the mood, the mentality that comes with it. Like so often in science, does not only produces techniques, but with every technique there comes an idea with it that science is having about us. And if you think that a child is the product of a fusion of a sperm and an egg, there's no any restriction to do that in a technique and to fuse an egg with a sperm. But the intention, of course, is related to how you think about that procedure. And if you think it has to do with making, then you develop that technique and you're going to make the children. That means that we, in the artificial technique, so to say, are defining, well, it's time for this child to be made, or we want this child, or we want you, or we want to have a child. And that completely denies, or apparently completely denies, that maybe the wanting of itself is the main, let's say, force that is behind every human conception. The child wants to be here. And we make of that we want the child to be here. So we are, so to say, at stake. We will make you, and you have to be like us, and we will define what you want, what you should be. And yeah, well, however you, in what way you think about these things, you cannot deny that also in so-called normal or natural birth and natural conception, also nasty things happen. But it is still open for future for the other. And in the manipulative way, it are we who define what is going to be. And that enforces, that typical modern egoistic mind that we are now so often propagate in our in our culture, society. That was a difficult question. Could you please repeat it?
Edward Abbey is quoted as saying, "You don't know who you are until you know where you are." And he is a great American philosopher and writer about preservation of the American West, especially in Utah. In your experience in traveling in the American wilderness, how does that relate to your notions of embryology in walking in the wild and the notion of who we are when we ask our mothers, where do we come from?
Yeah. Well, the main experience that sometimes can overwhelm me is, of course, that you can feel so small. In the Grand Canyon, you can feel the canyon so mighty. But yet my major hopeful experience there is I am part of it. I'm part of this major, fantastic planet and world. And how can I serve it? What is the planet expecting from me? How do I deserve? Why do I deserve to be here? And it gives me really the religious feeling that I have to give something back. That all this nature, all these fantastic forms, all this huge creation, it means something. It has to do something with me, and maybe I have a certain responsibility to fulfill that. That's my main experience. That beautiful planet and the beautiful landscapes and all these phenomena, that they made me possible. That I thank my existence to that, and that is my major message in my embryology. We are not different from animal or plant or mineral. We thank our existence to everything out there. Evolution did not produce us. We developed by means of evolution, and we have to thank the animal, the plant, and the planet, and the stars for our being here. Apparently, they are waiting for something. That is my deepest religious experience. It gives me a feeling of being reconnected with that nature, with that landscape, with that planet, with the animals. There is something between us. They are waiting for us or something like that.
Thank you very much for your time today, Doctor.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, they were difficult questions.